Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me for another Iron Age book review. Today we are taking a look at Jack and the Fallen Giants from the Symbolic World Press, written by Jonathan Pageau and illustrated by Eloise Scherer. Now, I would normally appear on screen to give this review. However, as some of you may already know, my camera has gone on the fritz, and I don't really want to record this on my webcam. It simply will not do justice to what I have to show you today. So I have pulled some images to help me illustrate what I'm talking about from Symbolic World's promotional materials for this book, and that's what we're going to be using to discuss it. Now, Jack and the Fallen Giants is a book in what Symbolic World Press refers to as Tales for Once and Ever. It is going to be a series of 8 fairy tales retold in modern language in a very, very durable format that you can share with your kids and hopefully your grandkids. As you may have already guessed from the title, Jack and the Fallen Giants is a retelling of Jack and the Beanstalk. As such, you are probably already familiar with the story, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. I'll just say that Pageau does a very good job retelling a story that most people are familiar with in a way that is very approachable, and overall I believe his prose serves both his audience and his story very well. However, the purpose of Symbolic World Press is not just to retell stories that everyone already knows already. It is to build this symbolic understanding of these stories, what they are trying to tell us about the human condition. I have more to say about that, but first I want to gush a little bit about the product itself. This is a really, really nice book. It's only about 50 pages long, but each page is chock full of quality. The printing is beautiful, the colors are vibrant, they are on a nice satin finish, heavy paper stock that is going to hold up to multiple readings. It will hold up to the hands of young children running over them, admiring all these details. This is not a product that you have to worry about wearing out after a couple of read-throughs. It's not something you have to worry about kids sticking in their backpack when they take it to school for show and tell or something like that. It's not a book you have to worry about not lasting through more than one kid. This is a really, really nice book. And a $40 price tag for a 50-page book looks really steep, and I understand that. But the value you get for this is more than just as a story to tell your kids and then maybe resell in a used bookstore after they grow up. This is an art piece quality book. It is an heirloom quality book, and you may want to hang on to it as such a thing. Scherer's artwork is incredibly beautiful. Most of the art in this book, as you can see from this image here, is in keeping with the great adventure books of yesteryear. It reminds me a lot of Jack Stockman's work on the Tales of the Kingdom and Tales of the Resistance books. And there was an old illustrated edition of The Princess and the Goblin that I remember reading as a child that also came to mind as I was reading this. I wasn't able to find that edition, so I can't tell you who the illustrator was, but I can tell you that Scherer's illustrations, done in what looks like colored pencil, have a rough vibrancy to them that really brings the story to life. You can see the tooth of the paper and the stroke of the pencil in every illustration, and it's really, really striking. If you did enjoy the sense of an illustrated manuscript or a stained glass window that you got from Snow White and the Widow Queen, it is a very different artistic experience, but I still think it's very enjoyable and will really appeal to young boys especially, which I think is more the target audience for this book. So the last thing to talk about is the symbolic reimagining that Pageau has put into the story. One thing I really like about this book that was missing from Snow White and the Widow Queen, at least in the edition that I got, is a referral to the Symbolic World website where they tell you you can see Jonathan Pageau's thoughts on the symbolic nature of the Jack and the Beanstalk story. I've actually been to the website, and it takes a fair amount of digging to find a video essay on this topic. I haven't actually watched it yet, though, because I am interested in how many of the points I can hit interpreting the book on my own. So I'm going to do a little bit of that here, and then I'm going to go watch Jonathan's thoughts on it, and I'm going to tell you how much of that comes through in the story he told. Now, maybe that's not entirely fair. I haven't watched the video yet, but I assume he's analyzing Jack and the Beanstalk as it has been handed down to us through various oral traditions and compilations of fairy tales, while this is his specific, symbolically imagined version of the story. But I will try to be as generous as I can in comparing what I got and what Pajot gets out of the story. So, right off the bat, Jack and his mother live off milk from a cow, except you can't live off milk from a cow. You need solid food to eat, right? Milk is symbolic of childhood. It is very often used as an image of a person who has not matured to the point where they can eat solid food. That tells us right away we are dealing with a coming-of-age story, right? Jack is moving beyond milk for food. And viewed as a whole, the entire story is about food on one level or another. So right away, symbolically, we have the idea of the story in a single image. We're getting past just milk. So Jack heads into town, but along the way he meets an old man who offers him 3 beans in exchange for his cow. Tells him these beans will grow into more beans that you can use to feed yourself. Jack is kind of taken in by this. It is a bit of a swindle, or at least it seems like a bit of a swindle. So he makes the trade, and he takes the beans home to his mother, who's a bit disappointed. Seeds are an interesting symbol as well. They do indicate potential. But it's not a potential we have access to right away, right? You have to do some work. You have to put something into the seeds. You have to plant them. You have to water them. You have to fertilize them. You have to make sure they aren't strangled by weeds. These seeds can be good for Jack as he grows up. Jack is coming of age. These seeds could represent his potential. He needs to put some effort into them, though, to get what they have to offer him. The seeds sprout overnight, and they reach up into the heavens. Jack has to climb the beanstalk in order to get something good out of it. So again, we have a representation of the effort here, but we also have, I think, a representation of man's adventurous spirit. Jack has to leave the comfort of home. He has to go on an adventure to a place no one else has ever been in order to get these good things and bring them back. It's kind of a metaphor, I think, for growing up as an adventure. All young boys want to go wild places and do things no one else has done before, and it is that spirit that turns them into men. I think these interpretations are pretty obvious and straightforward, just based on the story itself and the way it is told. However, Pajot goes a little bit off the beaten path here, because Jack does not go up the beanstalk once in Jack and the Fallen Giants. He goes up 3 times, and each time he climbs it a little bit higher. And by a little bit higher, I mean a lot higher, but that's neither here nor there. He actually meets 3 different sets of giants, and he brings 3 different things of theirs home with him. From the first set of giants, he brings home bronze biscuits. From the second set of giants, he brings home a chicken that lays silver eggs. And from the third set of giants, he brings home a golden harp. After each trip, Jack sees a dream of the old man he met on the road asking him a riddle, but he never answers the riddles, at least not in his dreams. But on his 3rd trip up the beanstalk, he meets a gatekeeper before he approaches the giant's castle, who asks him a riddle he can answer correctly. It's not explicitly stated, but I believe this gatekeeper was the same old man who gave him the beans. Through Jack's adventures up the beanstalk, we see him growing in a number of ways, which are in turn symbolized by the things he finds. I think it's very interesting the 3 different metals of the 3 different giants that Jack encounters. Now you may be saying, well, those are just 3 precious metals, right? Not exactly. You see, if there was a giant with copper biscuits, I would agree they are all precious metals, but they aren't copper biscuits, they are bronze biscuits. Bronze is a material that is used in construction and particularly in weapons, and I think in this case, it symbolizes the growth of Jack's strength. When he first gets the magic beans and goes up the beanstalk, he's very hungry and weak, but retrieving the bronze biscuits, he can then sell the bronze and have enough money to feed himself and his family for a little while, building up strength for his next excursion. Then he gains the silver eggs, and he's able to sell those and make investments. He's beginning to become intelligent in the way he uses money. He's learning to make plans, and he is growing a reputation. But it is the third and final trip that I think is really noteworthy, because Jack makes the third trip even though he already has all the money he could possibly need. He makes the third trip because it's there, because the allure of adventure and discovery is calling out to him. And that is when he finds the golden harp. And I believe that symbolizes his acquisition of wisdom, not merely strength and intelligence, the things he needs to get by in the world, but wisdom that makes life worth living. Hence the harp that plays beautiful music, music that opens up his mind and fills it with the depth and the beauty of the world around him. I also believe this is symbolized by his successfully answering the riddle of the gatekeeper. He has reached a point in his growth where he can actually see through the clever words of this man that has been drawing him along this path the whole time. It's a very fascinating, symbolic examination of this journey of growth, of coming of age, of developing your capacities, not simply to do what needs to be done to make your way through the daily grind, but actually developing an appreciation for the beauty and the splendor of the world around you. Okay, those are my thoughts. I'm going to go see what Jonathan Pageau has to say, and I'll get right back to you. Okay, very interesting thoughts he had there. I would say most of it came through. One thing that I didn't entirely get was his idea of hierarchy as an obstacle. The riddles and Jack's use of some trickery in order to steal from the giants is presented as hierarchy serving as a way to keep people from lower down on a hierarchy from accessing all the good and meaningful things in life. Something that wasn't entirely obvious to me, but does make sense once I've had it explained. I also found it very interesting, his comparison between Jack and Jacob, the biblical patriarch, who does in fact get a blessing from his father through trickery. And of course, when you're a boy, your father is a giant of a man, so I can really see the connection between Jacob and Jack. Very, very fascinating stuff. If you intend to use this book as a teaching tool, if you're going to read it to your kids and try and explain some of the messages in it, I would definitely recommend watching Pageau's video. It will really deepen the story for you. One last thing to mention, although Tales for Once and Ever are billed as a collection of 8 fairy tales, you don't really need to read Snow White and the Widow Queen in order to make sense out of Jack and the Fallen Giants. Continuity between these 8 stories does not look like it's going to be very strong. Although I do see on the list of the complete 8 stories, The Boy and the Giant is story 6, so I assume there will be some connection between that one and this one, but as it is, they seem to stand alone, at least so far, very well. So if that's something you're concerned about, I wouldn't be. I also really appreciate that we are getting a boy-centric fairy tale as the second book in the series. There is an unfortunate tendency in the modern day, thanks to Disney for the most part, to view fairy tales as something primarily for girls, but they have plenty of lessons for everyone if you just take the time to look at them. And I think Jack and the Beanstalk is a really great boys' fairy tale because, again, it has that spirit of adventure, of growth, of discovery baked into the events. So if you're interested in getting a good book for a boy you know somewhere between the ages of 6 and 10, you could do worse than picking up Jack and the Fallen Giants. I heartily recommend it if you know a child in that age range, or if you just really appreciate a very nice, cloth-bound, beautifully illustrated storybook. Now, speaking of books, I have self-published my first book. Have Spell Will Travel collects 4 novellas and 4 short stories, chronicling the life and times of Roy Harper, a man making his way through a West that never was, by magic and sword, righting wrongs and quelling monsters, and generally doing his best to make the West a better place. Starting tomorrow, I'll be summarizing some of the stories in the books to give you an idea of exactly what you can expect if you aren't sold on the concept just yet. If you're interested in either of these books, there will be links to where you can pick them up in the description down below. If you have any thoughts on Peugeot's work and you want to share them, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.